following is a production of the University of Minnesota.
Hi, everyone. I think we'll get started. Welcome. My name is Christopher James, and I'm the chair this year of the Communicators Forum. In real life, I am the communications director at the Weissman Art Museum, but I'm really excited to be the chair of the forum this year, and welcome to the first program of the year. Whether you're a new member or a renewing member, we're glad you're here. For Analytics and Measurement, Are My Communications Effective? And even though this is our first program of the year, I wanted to let you know that the forum board has been working really hard over the summer. The plans are in place for a great year of monthly programs, and Pamela is going to tell you a little bit about the October program, I think, when she introduces our presenters today. Also, be sure to join us for a new free program that the forum is offering this year, which is our First Thursday Mixers, which happen first Thursday of every month at the Campus Club. They're free. There's no formal program like we have today. It's just a chance to network and socialize with other members of the forum and enjoy the atmosphere of the Campus Club. So that first one is October 1st at 4:30. So we hope you can all be there for that. And we've been talking a lot this year with the forum board so far about the value of the Communicators Forum. And we think the forum is one of the best professional development values anywhere. And I wanted to call your attention to a handout that you may have picked up on the way in when you were registering, and if not, grab one on the way out. The Marketing and Promotions Committee of the forum put it together, and it kind of just explains where your $40 goes, your membership dues for a year's membership in the forum. $40, personally, I think is a really low price to pay for 10 great monthly programs, plus our listserv, plus a connection to a network of other people across the vast university who are doing more or less the same thing, and great opportunities for networking and collaboration. So $40 seems like a big value, but in case you're wondering how we parse that out and split it up and pay for various parts of what we do with the Communicators Forum, this diagram handout in the back helps explain that. And I think that's it. I want to introduce to you Pamela Vold, who's the co-chair of the Programs Committee this year, and she's going to let you know who our presenters are today. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. I'm really excited about our program today on analytics and measurement, which comes at a time when we're being asked increasingly to reduce our budgets and justify our expenditures. And we have to ask ourselves, with each project, is my communication effective? Andy Merrill of the Office of Measurement Services is going to talk today about what and how to measure, and Rhonda Zern of the Institute of Technology will discuss her recent experience surveying the effectiveness of the college's alumni magazine, Inventing Tomorrow, and also touch on the Institute of Technology's website, analytics, their focus groups with students, and how those measurements are helping them make decisions in their communications. Andy is the Assistant Director of the Office of Measurement Services, or OMS. Within OMS, he serves in a leadership capacity in managing OMS staff and in implementing internal policy and recommending future policy direction. And he also serves as a consultant and project manager for numerous programs, including consumer and employee insight initiatives. And he also serves as a member for the management team for the university's Office of Planning. And as part of this team, he provides strategic planning counsel to university senior administrators. Prior to coming to the university, Andy worked for a strategy consulting startup. He provided organizational efficiency and strategic communications consulting to clients in an international setting, including the People's Republic of China, Japan, and the Philippines. And our second speaker today is Rhonda Zern. For the last 4 years, Rhonda has served as Director of Communications for the Institute of Technology, the University of Minnesota College of Science and Engineering. She oversees the college's printed publications, e-communications, including mass emails and the website, media relations, and a wide variety of other marketing events and communications to the college's more than 55,000 alumni, 7,500 students, and 1,400 faculty and staff. Rhonda began her career as a newspaper reporter, but for the last 20 years has worked in education-related communications. She previously worked in K-12 education for St. Paul Public Schools and in higher education for the Minnesota State Universities. So thank you both for coming today, and then we're going to start off with Andy.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank everybody for coming. You must really like to, you're interested in measurement if you're going to be here today. I appreciate it. And as the first program, I guess my job will be to set the bar as low as possible so that all the other ones are really positive too. And then also another note, I wasn't sure if it was one communicator's owning this forum or not, so I apologize for the typo. I should have made that plural and possessive, so I'm sorry about that. What I was trying to accomplish today was to give all of you a little bit of an idea about the Office of Planning and Analysis, which has recently been revised a little bit with the leadership of Peter Radcliffe. Formerly, Bob Kavavic was the leader of that, and since he's retired. So to get a little bit a better idea of what the charter of that group is, setting the context for why I'm here today and some of the things I'll talk about. A little bit of the measurement issues on campus. That topic can be a little touchy because it can come off preachy, so if it is, somebody just kind of say, cool out, and I'll try to stop doing that. Give concrete examples of surveys that our office has already worked on, and then at some point, hopefully after both of us have presented, have a discussion about measurement, because the question of what to measure is a challenge. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish and how clearly you've articulated those goals. So I'll get into that a little bit, but I'm hoping to have a conversation on that. Is there anything else that people would be interested in focusing in on, maybe that I haven't broadly touched on here? Okay, how many people have experienced measuring their programs or doing surveys or focus groups? Awesome, so that's very helpful to know. I'll try to cover broadly some topics here, and then we'll get into more detail as Rhonda speaks too. But the Office of Planning and Analysis basically is comprised of capital planning groups, continuous improvement, institutional research, my office, measurement services, and space management. We're going through a strategic planning process now, actually, to kind of define what our goals are for the university, but broadly it's providing strategic direction and decisions to university leaders at both the senior leader level, but also at the unit level. So working with each of you, developing surveys or focus groups, aligning strategy and measurement, and ultimately looking at, for this group, how communications is measured and if it's having an impact on the markets that you serve. My office, as I mentioned, provides service quality evaluations, employee engagement, training needs and training evaluations, and performance evaluations. So pretty much anything from a planning and a measurement standpoint, not delivering the good, but hopefully trying to set the direction and providing some measurement as to whether or not you're achieving your goals. We do that through paper and web-based surveys, focus groups, exams. We provide student ratings of teaching and course evaluations to the 204 academic departments on campus. That's the academic piece. And then provide interviews on the administrative side as well. Strategic planning for those who are interested through the Office of Planning and Analysis. Other groups on campus. There are a lot, and this is a higher education institution, and there are a whole lot of experts, people who know more about surveys and statistics than me. I'm sure each of us could have some very interesting conversations about what we've learned and what we've done. So there's no shortage of expertise on this campus, starting with institutional research, another group in the Office of Planning. Minnesota Center for Survey Research, who we collaborate a lot with, sharing projects back and forth based on our charters. And then others, groups like those that are in CSOM or CLA, Moodle sites. With technology changing the way it is now, you can do pop-up surveys, quick polls really easily now. SurveyMonkey, which I'm sure all of you have heard of. Hopefully none of you have used before. I'm sure that's not the case, but we'll get into that a little bit too. And then other people who are in statistics, both in the colleges, in the School of Statistics and Biostats, the College of Education, and others. So there's just a wide variety of people who are capable of doing this. So clearly it's a very dynamic thing. And how do these groups communicate with each other and make sure that they're sharing results versus repeating activities is something that's quite a challenge. So surveys at the U of M. Clearly there is a major source of data that's coming from surveys, focus groups, data collection in general. There's a wide variety of purposes. People use them for performance evaluation. We evaluate the deans and senior administrators through Performance 360s. We can even use them for, hey, what should we bring to the annual picnic? There's a wide variety of uses, and it's really quick and easy for the most part, but there's some pitfalls, and I'll get into those a little bit too. So, and obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the university has a vested interest because of the moving parts, because of the issues that we can get ourselves into without really even thinking about it. Here's where I'll get a little preachy. First, there's legal. The HIPAA and FERPA issues, HIPAA about privacy of human subjects, FERPA about understanding or having the right to see your academic records, data practices, those that are direct reports to performance evaluation and protections that they have about what they say and how that's used during a performance evaluation process. Some issues there, risks associated with third-party vendors. This is the survey or the SurveyMonkey or Zoomerang tools. This was put together by the Office of General Counsel with over the last 2 years, and I can actually send their statement. It's for university internal purposes only, but some of this is verbatim from that. First is that one-sided contracts they're one-sided contracts in that if you do a click-through, it's considered a contract, and then there are some issues around who's owning the data, how is the data protected, how is it encoded, intellectual property issues. If you're creating it, it's the owners, the University of Minnesota is the owner of the survey. So I'll just kind of look over that broadly, but there are some risks with going with third-party vendors. Clearly, there are issues around capacity. We mentioned reduced resources and skills within offices. Sometimes it's just easier to go with that SurveyMonkey route, but there are some challenges with that too. So again, General Counsel's finding click-through agreements are contracts, and you're supposed to go through General Counsel to get that approved, and boy, is that a bureaucratic process. I realize that, but the university can be liable under those contracts. They violate university policy and practices, and causal of survey software can violate privacy laws. And this one's actually really sensitive because if for some reason that third-party vendor lets that data out, you probably don't know about that, and you're supposed to be presenting that information to those that take it, and that's usually around confidential information. So if you're not collecting social security numbers or any bank or credit card information, it's not a cause for concern, but something to be aware of. The second, strategic alignment, as I mentioned. How is what you're doing aligning to your unit, to your parent unit, to the university's strategic plans? I think we all would like to know what the university is saying we should do, but at the same time, every Monday and every day through the week, it's kind of hard to keep that alignment. And so it's important to sit down and think through what you're trying to measure and make sure that you're aligning those goals to the university's planning. And that's something that the Office of Planning and other units on campus, IR and others, are capable of doing too. University image and branding. I'm sure many of you are aware that there are some branding requirements that have come out recently, and there's issues around logos. Also, with the day and age of email, sending a mass email to your listserv is communication. Well, how does that differ than doing a survey to that list? And if it doesn't look right and it doesn't have the right colors or the survey questions are poor, sampling is bad, that's an issue that University Relations is obviously concerned with too, is relating to how that's giving the impression to, giving the university an image more concerning with that of outside the university. I mean, with internal, you can kind of work around those issues, but when you're working with external, it's something to certainly be aware of. Obviously, as I mentioned, measurement and statistical, but there is certainly not a shortage of abilities to do that here. Utilization of data, that's tying back to the strategic planning process. How are you using this information? We were talking before that there's some stacks of reports that you can get, and how are you using that data, and can that data be used and shared with other people? I think when you're doing one individual measurement of a publication or otherwise, it's very specific. But if you're looking at the same markets, how can you collaborate and ask questions that can serve multiple units and groups so that we don't oversample our people internally, and that we also just are more thoughtful about how we connect with externals. So beyond that, what the university's opinions are, there are also things to consider when doing measurement or surveys or focus groups in general. Intellectual property, and does the survey incorporate intellectual property, or is it property itself? Are you developing a tool or a survey that could be used more broadly for other uses? The example of that, which may not be intuitive right off the bat, but is the performance evaluations that we provide to the deans and senior administrators. That's become intellectual property, and it's a tool that's actually looked at by other universities as a good process. And so does the process of doing measurement create intellectual property, and how is that going to impact what you're working on? External compliance and IRB. Data security, data integrity, and methodology. Are you needing to protect the anonymity of the respondents, or is it confidential? Those are two very different things, and how can you make it confidential but still get something good out of the data? And then if it's anonymous, are you going to get information that's really constructive in when you want to try to do some evaluation? So these are all things to consider. Hopefully I've painted a picture of a little bit of complexity when it comes to these things, both at the university level and at the individual level, while showing that there are a lot of university resources on campus to do that. But specifically with communication research, what are you trying to do? You're all communicators here, so this should be all pretty straightforward. Who are you serving? Who is the target market? What are you trying to communicate? What are your objectives? Is it to expose or make those aware of the things that you're doing? Is it from memory, benefits to change their attitudes? Is it to persuade them to buy a product? Is it to persuade them to come to an event? Is it to change attitudes? Because I think this university has some challenges to do that with the community. And then what are you saying? How are you saying it? How is it presented? And obviously, there's a budget, but then, at the end of the day, how are you evaluating whether or not it's successful? And with that, as I started the presentation, I said, well, it depends on what you're trying to do. And sometimes it's hard to really articulate that. It may seem little simplistic, but how important is it to think up front about what is it that you're really trying to do? And not just say, I want to get this message out, but is it to persuade? Is it to make aware? Because if you know that, then you're able to evaluate it, because you can make questions, you can do focus groups, you can segment the market the way you want it. It's all dependent on how you're trying to achieve your goals. And I'm sure that you guys came across that and looked at that. And so I'm sure there'll be more detail that's provided with that as the second presentation comes around. So this is just, a visual for those who are more visual on ways of looking at the different processes you need to take, from awareness to memory to attitude and ultimately to change actions. And so there's some language there that, when you think about making your objectives, these words and the language that you create in your project charters or in your kind of draft statements can be used again when you think about the measurement. Because if it's to establish the brand awareness, there are ways of looking at the questions and by specific market, whether or not they are aware of what it was, has the message been received, and are they moving towards the next, if it's memory or otherwise. So it's just really important to think about what it is that you're trying to achieve, and hopefully that won't be the only thing you leave with, because it's obviously pretty straightforward. So some case examples of what we've done here. This strategic level of one is Office of Student Affairs Communications Committee. They went through a strategic planning process whereby they were basically trying to measure the awareness of the different units, both unit to unit, but also the students to the different services that Student Affairs provides. That was part of a broader strategic planning process where they used the balanced scorecard, and one of the major initiatives was to improve their communication so that they could better become the best student affairs at the university, and also then make the university that much better of a place for students to come. So it's a little bit of a higher level look at what they were trying to achieve. More tactically is Wellness Works readership survey. The objective there was to provide some concrete data to prove its worth to advertisers while getting information on content and distribution methods. And briefly can just show the output that we created there. Okay, so basically just a PowerPoint or a Word document that shows questions they had. Which of the following best describes how you read Wellness Works? And I'm sure you've all created questions like this before, looking at trying to understand the reader, who they are, and whether or not they use your publication the way you intend it. And I'm sure we'll get into a lot more detail as an example there. But that's something that our office has done, institutional research has helped with, and others. So, and then another example, and I'm not going to open this one because it's a lot larger of a file, is the Minnesota Business Survey, looking at the external community as part of the whole state about awareness of and value of different services that the university provides, from faculty and center expertise to student placement, continued education, sponsorship and marketing. For those of you who've been in the CSOM building, obviously everything in there is branded, so if there's companies that want to be part of that too. And then anything from tech commercialization and triggering new industry. But just to give you a broad idea of some of the projects we've worked on, going from a communication standpoint. With that, just to kind of give you a broad overview of how measurement process or assessment processes happen at the U of M here, at least within our office, and I know that IR does this as well, institutional research, but there's an initial consultation, understanding the client, understanding you, measurement, consultation, understanding the project. Those were the times where we get to ask the stupid questions about what it is you're trying to achieve. What are the communication objectives? What are your goals? Because then we'll translate that into good questions, reliable and valid questions that will be, hopefully help get you the information you need to make decisions, and that's where the developing the tool comes in. That can be both on paper surveys or online surveys, but also in focus groups and developing a discussion guide, understanding what it is that you're trying to achieve. The beauty of working with clients up front on that is that if we're part of that process of establishing the objective of the project, then it's a lot easier to measure, but it doesn't always work that way. But it's definitely something to consider, that when you're putting together these projects, you think about that. And then analysis and reporting, understanding the results, presentation, making sense of those results, and then hopefully making some actions on it. So it's, again, pretty straightforward, but the idea is this is not really rocket science per se, but it's something that takes time and energy, and certainly takes resources. So this is just a summary of what I was trying to achieve as far as looking at the Office of Planning, increasing awareness on the measurement issues, providing concrete examples of what we've done at OPA, and specifically my office, speaking to things that I've been exposed to, and then hopefully towards the end we'll be able to have a good conversation about some of the issues. I'm hoping or expecting that you might have more concrete questions. And I was told to wait until the very end for questions, but I can certainly provide this slide again later. But if you're interested in the Office of Planning and Analysis, institutional research, or my director or myself, there's some contact information there. So I think I'm on time, and I'll pass it on to Rhonda.
Well, I'll start out while that's going for a little bit here. First of all, I just want to qualify that I am not an expert on evaluation or any kind of surveys. However, I am probably more like all of you out there in the fact that you're being asked to evaluate your programs. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we did, how we did it, and I do have a little bit of background in some of these areas and have done surveys in the past. I'm hoping he can, he clicked right there, and oh, there it comes. Okay, great.
Magic.
So again, I can only, it just happened right when, that's the way it always goes when people, the people who know what to do, they just come up and the computer does what it is. And I also want to give credit to Silva Young in my office, who really worked with me on this survey and made sure all the details got taken care of, and the pieces kept it going and made sure that we met our deadlines. First of all, I want to explain a little bit about our college. We are the Institute of Technology, and some of the information I was identified as being from OIT instead of IT. So I just want to explain a little bit. I think a lot of people don't even really know what our college is. We are the Institute of Technology. We are the College of Engineering, Physical Sciences, and Mathematics here at the university. We have about 55,000 plus alumni. And we have about 4,600 undergraduate students, which continues to grow, and about 2,600 graduate students. And we have 400 faculty, and we grant about 1,600 degrees each year. About 1,000 of those are in undergraduate degrees, and the rest are master's and PhD programs. So we have some very strong programs. Our Inventing Tomorrow magazine, which was the primary focus of our survey, has a long history. So that's a really big qualifier. It's been around for a long time. Some of you might have newer magazines. What we found out might not translate for you. It might, depending on what you do. But it's been around for over 20 years. The name changed in 1993 to Inventing Tomorrow. And the magazine went from 3 to 2 issues per year in 2001. Otherwise, it was 3 times a year. And right now, we print about 65,000, and we mail about 58,000 of those. So we mail to all of our alumni and then friends of the college. So that's about 58,000 each issue. And then we distribute internally to our departments and our centers. That's how our faculty and staff and grad students receive it. And then we use it at various events and that kind of thing. When I came here 4 years ago, I saw the amount of resources that we spend on our magazine, and I know that's been an item of contention across the university, is printed publications. So at that point, I really knew that we needed to do some evaluation of it. But like anything, when you're new, it takes a while to figure everything out. We heard lots of anecdotal stories. In fact, one of my favorites is the first time I met one of our alumni who's a former astronaut. And I met him for the first time a couple of years ago. He was just here on campus, again, a couple of weeks ago doing a public lecture for us. But I was taking some photos for our magazine, and I said, oh, this is for an Inventing Tomorrow magazine. And I kind of started to explain. He's like, oh, yeah, I read that all the time. And I was like, an astronaut reads our publication. I was so excited. So, you know, we had heard lots of anecdotal, oh, yeah, I know exactly what that is, and oh, I read every issue, and oh, I love that. And we got lots of feedback all the time, but we really needed to assess the impact of our investment. You know, in the last year or year and a half, the budget crunch has really pushed that. So we were looking at it more. Even before some of the university surveys and those kinds of things, we were preparing for this. And I also caution you, if you do any kind of surveys, be prepared for the results. We knew that if the results came back really bad, that people weren't reading it, that we were probably going to discontinue it or do something different. So I think you just need to be prepared for any types of results. Finding the resources is always a huge key thing. And we decided to use some funds from a foundation account. Because this was really surveying our alumni, we have a foundation account that's specifically regarding communication and outreach to alumni, and we thought this was a good use of that money to find out more about that. So anytime we can use private or foundation money for this kind of thing, I would recommend that, just so we're not using taxpayer money for these kinds of things. And then also researching good consultants with experience and then clearly defining those roles. You know, whether you look internally, I think there are some great resources internally. We decided to go with Decision Resources, which has a lot of experience assessing newsletters for cities, school districts, and has done work here at the university too. So to kind of separate, clearly define those roles, what we did was we defined what we wanted to know. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. And those provided the rough basis for questions. We reviewed the survey questions. We did the presentation to our key stakeholders after we had the results, and then, of course, you know, the next steps for decision making. Our consultants really worked with us on what the right survey method was, drafted the survey questionnaire. They administered the survey and did lots of analysis. I have a nice big stack of analysis. I gave you the one-page analysis that I've been giving to most people. So, you know, they really provided a nice, both key findings of executive summary. They also, some of the slides that you'll see here, they provided for us that we can go out and talk to our key stakeholders. So that's nice to be able to have some of those slides. And then the in-depth cross-tabulation, which is this nice big, you know, stack here. And then they've continued to be a resource if we have additional questions. So the questions that I think before you get started on any survey is, what do you want to know? So what I really, you know, spent some time on is things that I wanted to know, and put them in the form of a question. Not a question that we were going to ask our survey, the people that we were surveying, but things like, are people reading our publication? Are they even aware that they get it in their mailbox? How often do they read it? You know, those were the kinds of things that I put on one sheet of paper and gave to the consultant. Things, are the people who, if they read it, are they more likely to give? Are they more likely to volunteer? Are they more likely to recommend it as an option for as an education option for either undergraduate or graduate education? Those are the things that I wanted to know. I also wanted to make sure they tied into some of our strategic goals too in asking those kinds of questions, and just kind of the overall impression that the college was. So that's what I gave to them. And then we determined what we thought was the best survey method, talking together, and then what we would do with the results, and also listening to any consultant that you're working with. What are they saying that you know, the direction that you go. We decided on a telephone survey, and we decided on that for a variety of reasons. The biggest reason was that that's a push method rather than a pull method. In my personal past experiences, and I would like to hear your input on this, you know, the web and mail surveys, but we found, my personal past experience found that we got very good results from more of a push method rather than a pull. And mainly because you don't just get the people who feel very strongly about it. When you call and you have somebody on the phone, they're much more likely to spend some time. But, you know, so some of this on here is my personal viewpoint on that, and I would love to hear other points of view on that, but I'm telling you my experience, and so you can debate that as long as you'd like. But that is how we did it. Just a little bit about the survey details. We surveyed 400 randomly selected alumni. We decided that 400 was the minimum amount, because we were trying to keep costs down, the minimum amount to get relatively reasonable, the percent of projectability across the alumni. So we had a plus minus 5%. If we would have done 500, I'm doing this from memory, I think it would have gone down to like 4, the error, you know, so. But we decided that 400 would give us about what we thought was reasonable. We decided to do half from Minnesota and half from across the country, because that mirrors our alumni population. It took about an average of 16 minutes to complete the phone survey. We thought that was important, not to keep it any longer than about 20 minutes, which this was even on the longer side, but they said that people that did answer the survey were more than willing to talk. Some talked for a lot longer. And the non-response rate was 3.7%, so it's just some. The next few set of slides are some slides that they gave us that we are using now to present this. So it's not in my nice little template here. This first slide basically just shows the cross-section, and we were very pleased, the power of a random sample survey, that we really got a nice cross-section of our alumni. So our alumni from all different age ranges here. And then also that we did not split it for bachelor's, master's, or PhD. But again, the power of a random sample survey, this pretty much mirrors the population of our graduates too. So we have about 78%. So that was very exciting. Our first number that we got was the number of people who recall receiving the publication. And about 73% said that they remembered receiving the publication, which according to the survey consultants that we worked with is about 8% higher than the norm when they've done other random sample surveys of public newsletters like this. So we were very happy about that they at least remembered receiving it. When you get a little bit more detailed, excuse me, about 78% said they read at least one article each issue. About 10% more of those people said that they read at least one article throughout the entire year, and only 11% said they skimmed the publication. If I'm saying some of these numbers pretty quickly, that is, most of these numbers are on that one pager that I gave you, so you can take a look at that. The average amount of time they spent reading, it was 25 minutes, and they said they keep for about a week. So we were pleased with those numbers. We really wanted to know what were they reading. So if they're reading it, what are they reading? And at least 70% that were surveyed said they skim or read every section. So that was pleasing to know. But by far, most of them were reading the feature stories, which was no big surprise to us, but it did kind of confirm our suspicions. And, and then Tech Digest and the Retrospect, which is our kind of our historical article. So it didn't surprise us, but now we had some firm numbers. We also asked what they wanted to read about. And this also didn't surprise us because we had seen this in other information, but again, we had some now numbers to back this up, is that they wanted to read about current students. And one of the things that I'll talk about a little bit later is how we always had stories about students, but how we're featuring them a little bit more, putting more cover stories of students. And this is an alumni publication. Our primary audience is alumni. And it was a little surprising because I thought they'd probably want to read about other alumni, but they really wanted to know about students and what's happening with current students, and then general Institute of Technology news. And then some of these other things, were pretty understandable. The one thing that I was kind of surprised about is the alumni notes. And we don't have a lot of alumni notes in there, but in our publication, and this kind of confirmed that maybe we shouldn't, that maybe that is better placed in some of our department newsletters or in other kinds of places. So, because that was something that had one of the lowest areas. But I know that they are highly read in some of the department newsletters, so maybe they want to read alumni notes, but only people that they know. So. We asked about whether it gave a favorable impression, and we were very pleased about this. Only 1% said unfavorable, and 3% were unsure, but there was a very favorable and somewhat favorable, a very high rate there. So we were pleased by that. We also asked just kind of general categories of what, if they recognized, or if the publication reinforced the college's top priorities. Do they feel that this, provides recognition of our top priorities? And we asked about research and education, renewable energy, and the environment, which is one of our top priorities. And you can see that they rated it very favorable, that it gave them a favorable impression in those areas. And then healthcare, medical devices, nanotechnology, digital technology, and strengthening undergraduate and graduate programs. So again, these are numbers. We also asked about the university missions, and you can take a quick look at that. I'll skip over that pretty quickly there, but again, good numbers of recognition of these and how it relates to the Inventing Tomorrow magazine. This is probably one of my favorite slides. It really talks about the direct action. So if they are reading the magazine, are they much more likely or somewhat more likely to volunteer time, provide financial support, recommend as an undergraduate, or recommend as a graduate option? And the 24%, that 9 and the 15 there with the financial support, that said they were either much more likely or somewhat more likely. That 24% is twice as large as the norm. So that I thought was a very confirming slide, that when they're reading the publication, they have more of an inkling to give to our college. And so that is a number that our external relations office, development folks, were very interested in also. So I tried to make sure that when we were asking questions that it could be used by other offices within our college, so our development folks, our alumni folks, our student services folks, our admissions counselor, so all of those people that are doing all their jobs, that they can kind of look to this and say, okay, this is what some people are saying, this is what, and this publication has either, like I said, I was prepared for having these numbers not so positive either, and then we would have taken different action. But since they were very positive numbers, we were pleased and know that we need to continue to improve the publication because people are looking at it. Whoops, did I skip one? Or did I miss one? Shoot. Okay, sorry. It must be later. We also, this is an important one. If we switched to putting it online, which we thought that was an important question, we realized that we were going to lose some readers. And in fact, 45% said they were either somewhat less likely or much less likely to read it online. So the time is not right for us to move in that direction yet. I'm going to try to move along here quickly. This slide also talks about comparing those who said they were much more likely to contribute, somewhat more likely to contribute, and then if they were either somewhat less likely to read or much less likely to read the magazine. So if you look at kind of right in this area right here, we saw that the people who were more likely to contribute are also less likely to read it online. So that was a very telling piece for us too. We also looked at our items electronic newsletter, and I'm going to kind of skip through these kind of quickly, but we wanted to ask about other things if we had their attention. We asked about our website. We found that both of those numbers were not real good at this point, so we need to make some improvements there. Whether they attended events, not very high numbers. We also asked about our department newsletters, so our academic department newsletters. And at this point, about half of them, 55%, said that their department had a newsletter. Now, some have a once yearly newsletter, so they might not consider that a newsletter. But most of our departments do have newsletters, but this group, half of them said they did. But the good news is that of those, 91% said that they read at least some of their department newsletter. So that was good news, too, for our department newsletters. So what are we going to do with all of these decisions or all of this information? What we decided to do is that we were going to keep the magazine at 2 issues per year. We still are under a budget crunch, so we're going to try to reduce the number of pages slightly. We are reducing the costs of outside writers and photographers. We're transitioning to putting more content online, also providing extra content online to get people moving in that direction, because we know that is the future, and we know that we need to continue to move in that direction, but this survey really showed us that we're not quite ready for that. So maybe a few years down the line, we'll redo this survey and we'll find that more people are ready. And we continue to evaluate using other methods, focus groups, online. I will say that after this, we did do just a little online, not a Survey Monkey survey, an online survey just to get some feedback and just to show you that a poll survey doesn't always pull. We got 7 responses. We put a little thing in our magazine that went out to 58,000 people that said, go to this website, and and we also sent out some emails. Now, we didn't promote it as much. We wanted it more just for additional feedback, and I think we'll do something more as the year goes on, but it was a little disappointing. I wanted to talk about just a few other things, too, in addition to this survey. We just started our web analytics about a year ago. We put Google Analytics. If you don't have Google Analytics on your website, you should, because it's free, and you get a lot of great information. And we have about a year's worth of results now, and we are in the process of redesigning our website, and we saw that prospective and current students pages have by far the highest traffic. And so we are redesigning our website with that in mind. And then we are also using those analytics to determine a variety of other things, like our weekly student electronic announcements. We can check to see how many of them clicked through onto those, and then we can start ordering them according to what students are interested in reading about. We also have done a few focus groups. We got on the agenda of the Institute of Technology Student Board, talked with them what they want as far as communications from us for student communications. And then we developed our student dashboard in response. And if you haven't checked it out, there's the URL right there. It's just dashboard.umn.edu. And that's a whole nother presentation itself, so I won't take time. We also started tracking our time within our department. I have 3 staff members and myself, and we started tracking our time. We are using TickSpot.com, which is a very low-cost, easy-to-use software. And we're keeping track of primarily who our clients are. I mean, and I use clients pretty loosely when I say that because it's our external relations office, our alumni relations, our student services, and our departments and centers. And then we're tracking what we're doing and how we're doing it for them. And I'm thinking that at the end of this year, we'll determine if our priorities that we set at the beginning of this year match where we're actually spending our time. And then it's just going to be good information to have when budget time comes around. So that's it for me. Sorry it took so long.
This question is for Sharon. Rhonda, sorry. Did you find any interesting differences in your Minnesota versus non-Minnesota respondents? And also, was there any age differential in the groups that were willing to read online versus those that weren't?
Not surprisingly, the older alumni do prefer printed publications, but we did find some. In fact, this is one of the pieces I was just talking with Andy ahead of time, that we received a book of all of the cross tabulations, and I need to spend a little more time with it just because we got this information in April, and you know how it is in April when you're just, and actually I got this in May. So over the summer, I didn't really have time to go through this, but again, we will look at those things a lot more. But there were some surprising numbers in here too. Some of the students who graduated in the 90s and 2000s, are liking some of the printed pieces too. So, and then, let me see, you asked about the age differences, and then what was the other piece? Oh, Minnesota, non-Minnesota. We didn't notice much difference there. Maybe a little bit in the numbers of events that they attended, but generally it was pretty similar.
Here, on one of your slides about choosing the method, it said electronic format SKUs. What was that?
I qualified that in the sense that a web survey is a poll survey, but Andy might have some different opinions on that, so I would love to hear what he has to say.
Well, generally speaking, when you're choosing methodology, it's dependent on a lot of moving parts. I was kind of curious, and not to pin you down on this, but how much you had as a budget to do that, because I think that online is going to be a much different cost than doing a phone one-on-one survey. So there are other factors that go into it, and ultimately, sampling plays into that. But they're called best practices for a reason and not rules. And so it's hard to really speak to it because it just depends on your budget, depends on what you're going to do with it. A lot of times it depends on how big the decision is. And there's a lot that goes into it, and so I can't really speak directly to it, but it does depend on a lot of different parts.
Well, one of the things too, I agree. When we do a lot of web surveys, when we're doing to students, when we're doing other kinds of things, when we know that we have a captive audience, when we're trying to reach, when we have all of the emails. First of all, we only have about half of emails of our alumni. So that kind of ruled out a web survey to begin with, because we're sending this publication to all of our alumni. We only have emails for about half of our alumni. We couldn't really do a web survey on a printed publication. So that was one of the...
Well, I was going to ask, and this is linked to your funding too. I mean, the
Yes.
major question you had was
Yeah.
how is this impacting the funding we're getting from our alumni?
Yes.
And so that's not a small decision. And obviously you're going to want to change things and impact your external funding, and so it's a big decision to make. And for that, you're going to want to have a larger, you want to have access to everybody, and you're going to want to be able to have the highest response rate possible.
Well, and we do spend a lot of money on this publication. It's a huge amount of resources, not counting our internal staff time. We spend about $140,000 a year on this publication. So we thought it was very important that we spend some money on this. Now, as I said, we used foundation money. We thought it was an appropriate use of that specific account because it's geared toward alumni relations and communication to alumni. So it was no cheap endeavor, and we were aware of that going in, and that was, but we thought if we're spending $140,000 a year on this publication, we need to spend some money and make sure that this is done right. So that was a decision that we made. We tried to make it as broad as possible so it would cover as much as possible.
Hi, either or both of you can answer this. I'm wondering if or how you report your results to the people that you surveyed.
I'll just tell you briefly, we did have something in our last magazine, in our Dean's column. We talked a little bit. It was 400 people that were surveyed, so it's not like, but we did have some information in our Dean's column in the magazine telling about that. And then, of course, I've done many of these kinds of presentations at our department head meetings, our some of our alumni boards, some of those, and then, of course, to the dean's staff to explain what this is, and to some of our communicators in our departments. And so that's pretty much where we're at.
Well, and I think our office looks at it as an incentive. So one thing you can ask, what we would ask up front is, what are you going to use this for? Who's it going to go to? What answers do they want? Because your one sheet of phrasing questions, what do we want? Are they using it? Are they funding money? All that. That should be a wide variety of questions coming from different stakeholders. And so one question we would ask is, do the people taking this expect to get the results? And if so, communicate that up front. Tell them what they're going to get and how they can access it. So there's certainly not a rule of thumb for that per se, but you need to consider that up front. And we look at it as an incentive because a lot of people, especially when we do focus groups, people say, well, how are you going to report back to us? We want to know. And as long as it's a pre-agreement, then share it however you feel comfortable.
Anybody else? I have a question for Andy. Do you think that survey methods, for example, doing web surveys versus doing phone surveys, do you think that there's a generational shift going on? Do you think that maybe web surveys might not be as accurate now as they're going to be in the future?
That's an interesting question. I will say that the form of questions that were asked in the telephone survey could be administered exactly the same way online. The questions weren't open-ended. It was not entirely qualitative. So, how would you had a lot of Likert scale questions, and that's possible to do online too. So the transferability there is the same, but as far as response rate, I think that's an interesting thesis for someone in the statistics world to answer. My guess would be yes.
And Andy referenced the questions. Now, I shared the questions with him because he had asked for some of the other survey stuff. But if you want to actually see the questions, the raw questions, I'd be happy to share those with any of you. But one of the things, too, the generational thing, I mean, we really rely on surveys to our students as being pretty, using electronic surveys to our students where we have all of the email addresses as being a lot more accurate than, say, a web survey to our alumni. I mean, so, I'm not an expert on that, but,
Yeah, I'm just imagining the selection set of emails as they advance in age is probably going to go down, whereas you're going to have more emails from people at a younger age. So I kind of wonder about that.
Anecdotally, I've done a lot of work with students for different projects, and they'll say, oh, email me, and then they won't read it.
Yeah.
They'll say, yeah, get it in my email. I'll have it in my inbox. I'll organize it. I'll be good to go. They have no clue what it says. And they'll say what to do instructionally speaking, and there still won't be readership. So yes, they might be more comfortable with it, but if it inducing, action, it's hard to say because we're all human and we all kind of read it and then forget it and put it somewhere and then, what do you do with it?
Andy, are your rates of your office that you charge to your clients, are those comparable with outside firms, or can we get a deal?
We offer either a 15 or 30% discount depending on, it's 30%, the rate for external people is 30% more than internal.
Just say this one loud if you like. Did I hear a rumor that the university has an online survey tool available?
Yes, and how can I say this? There are still negotiations going on as to how that will be used and how it will get rolled out, both for administrative purposes and academic purposes. That is still in discussions with OIT and OPA.
One of the things I will just say with online surveys, since we never use SurveyMonkey and we've never developed a University of Minnesota branded header for it, but we have developed a, that is something to think about with online surveys. We all get so much spam, and it's hard that Peter Ramenschneider, my electronic communications manager, we have the $200 subscription for SurveyMonkey that we never use. So we're able to modify the header, and we have a nice University of Minnesota branded header. So when students get it, at least it looks like it's coming from the university. I mean, they'll get the email that goes with it, but we thought that was an important piece.
Well, one comment I will make about that is that I think there needs to be a check of reality on this, is that you're going to have to do surveys the most efficient way possible, and that's exactly where the university tool is playing in, but it needs to be a thoughtful implementation, because there are huge concerns about oversampling, because the response rates will continue to go down, and so you'll say, I'm getting no response rate, so I'm going to send out another survey, and it's just this vicious cycle. And so it needs to be planned out, but the reality is that we have to have some alternative for people using SurveyMonkey, because there are liabilities there, but at the same time, it's reality. I mean, you're going to have to do it. So.
Great. Has your department weighed in on, I know the university is inking a deal with Google. Have you weighed in on the survey tool?
We haven't. That's something that I will bring to Peter's attention. My thought on that would be that as long as it's on, well, that's actually an interesting perspective. One concern is where the data is being stored, and and what information you're asking. We've dealt with it more from the SurveyMonkey and the contractual piece of that, but it's free, so that's a whole nother twist that we have not really considered or come across yet. So if we could maybe talk offline, and I'll bring that up to Peter and come back to that. If it's a smaller survey, it's not that big of a deal, but.
Well, thank you both for coming today and talking. I think that's about all the questions we have time for, but thank you both, and hope you enjoyed the program.